Good morning. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apigee online meetup. My name is Oliver, and I will be your host today. Because of the current situation, again, we are broadcasting from our respective homes instead of the London offices, and we're very excited to have you join us today for our conversation. Today marks our 10th Apigee online meetup, back by popular demand. It is our goal to be as interactive and as educational as possible. The region we broadcast to is diverse, so I look forward to your perspectives, your comments and questions throughout today's session. We've got a lot to get through today, so after this introduction, I'm going to give a short introduction to running an API-first platform business. And then we'll hear from Simon, who will talk about driving commercial impact with a true platform strategy. We'll then, at about halfway point, have an opportunity to take questions from you. We'll then roll into our fireside chat between Simon and myself, and then towards the end, have another opportunity to answer questions from yourselves. So there's lots of opportunity to ask questions throughout this session. Please don't just wait towards these windows or towards the end of the meetup to ask those questions. Please, as we go forward, if something comes to mind, please do ask them in the On24 tool here. Today's speaker, I'm very pleased to say that we're joined today by Simon Torrance. Simon is the creator of the New Growth Playbook, co-founder of the Platform Economy Summit, and co-author of Fight Pack, How to Win in the Digital Economy with Platforms, Ventures, and Entrepreneurs. So without further ado, get yourself comfortable. Let's get started. So to warm things up and get everybody on the same page, let's talk about API-first platform businesses, executing with that platform mindset. For the digital native platform businesses like Google, APIs are in our DNA. It is how we share data within the business and outside the business. There are substantial commercial and transformative effects if you execute well. I'll touch on some key examples of business outcomes our customers have realized as a result of executing well. Now, one of the challenges around APIs is the fact that they've been around for such a long time. People's perspective of them is that they're about technology and integration and access, this left-hand side of this sliding scale. Apigee and myself spend a lot of our time helping customers really think about this right-hand side, where these substantial effects can be realized because now a business can efficiently participate in vibrant digital ecosystems, experiment, launch new business models, new ventures, and monetize in new and different ways. The organizations that do this well are where APIs aren't just in the periphery. APIs are now central to everything that they do, this API-first culture. So APIs are built by default, but APIs are just how data is shared through the business and in and out of that business. Many of you will be familiar with that Jeff Bezos mandate in 2002, no less. And now that really launched that API-first culture in Amazon. And most industry observers would say that that was key to how Amazon has shown extraordinary growth and adaptability and resilience as that business has evolved. These are sort of examples where business realizes network effects of growth, new revenue streams, resilience and adaptability. There are other larger financial incentives to execute a platform strategy. McKinsey believes that by 2025, so not that far away, $60 trillion is going to flow through digital platforms. Benzel, Lagarde, and Van Alstyne, in that academic paper called The Impact of APIs in Firm Performance, talk about a number of benefits, financial benefits to an organization. And the call out there is that they believe that you can achieve a 12% increase in market capitalization if you execute well. Now, there are more tangible, more immediate business outcomes, which I'll touch on in a moment. So an API platform and strategically placing that in the heart of your business enables you to control and enable the flow of data through supply and demand. Let's go through supply here. So it may well be that you already today have a rich catalog of products and services, perhaps from lots of different parts of the business, if you're a large group company. For many of our customers, it is about aggregating supply from partners and startups. So, for example, leveraging another company's products and services, or indeed content. Many of our customers are trying to interact much more efficiently with other industries, telcos, banks, logistics. Classic examples of where a business now needs to be very efficiently interacting with other industries. And of course, things at the bottom there, for particularly like technology companies, smart cities, telcos. There's often a huge fleet of devices and sensors out there, and you need to aggregate that data and flow it into the business. And then demand. So again, partners. It may well be that a channel for your products and services will be strategic partners. It might be the long tail through third-party applications and developers. Social channels, of which there's always a new one popping up every couple of years. Of course, omnichannel and devices of all sorts, and of course, mobile channels. So by strategically placing that API platform in the middle, it enables you to insert that control plane as data flows in and out and through the organization. It enables you to govern that data, protect it, but also unlock it where appropriate, package it, productize it, and monetize it. Now, monetization is a key data strategy, and it is often rooted around some sort of partner strategy. This enables you now to create these highly reusable assets, these APIs, and it enables you to decouple old and new worlds or different parts of that demand supply balance that want to operate at different speeds. Simon's going to talk about this model of supply and demand a little bit more. He's also going to talk about innovation models that you can drive into corporates. APIs really help an organization and unlock that innovation whilst also leveraging those efficiencies of scale, those assets that an enterprise has. Data is fundamental here. So APIs and this API layer gives you this unique opportunity in capturing data consistently, large volumes of data. So it's also important that you're capturing that data, you're not scared of the volumes of data, that you are democratizing that data, and you are giving the different teams within your business that data so they can drive insight into their different product areas. This slide emphasizes now this future state for organizations that they are becoming orchestrators, facilitators between supply and demand, facilitating highly efficient transactions. I talked about some tangible commercial effects that some of our businesses, some of our customers have realized. So partners is a key KPI for many of our customers, often coming from a world where onboarding used to take years, if not several months. So this is a KPI from a telco where they could increase the time, they could reduce the time to onboard from 2 years to 2 weeks. Now that is an important KPI for anybody on a journey of a partner ecosystem. Scale. a technology company we work with runs a platform at 10x the scale of other projects with 1/10 the workforce, because that platform layer gives you a unique opportunity to facilitate these large groups of supply and demand. Optionality. So it's not just about speed here, it's also the cost in which to do something. So this comes from a retailer where they could increase the frequency of digital channel deployments by 30 times. That meant, for example, that they could also quickly and cheaply launch new products, new offerings, digital offerings to their customers to validate as to whether they were going to be impactful products in their own right. New call center applications, new mobile applications. These were complex apps built within weeks. And lastly, products and services. A retailer here increased their product count 10x from 50,000 to 1.5 million SKUs, product variants. And they did that within the first year of launching their marketplace, the marketplace being a type of platform strategy. So these are kind of good examples of KPIs that excite the business community today. I want to call out two customers that are really demonstrating this phenomenally well. In the world of retail, Magalu, Magazine Luiza, based in Brazil. And in the world of financial services, Apigee, which spun out of Allstate. They also show two very different examples of driving innovation within your business, of which Simon will go into in more detail. Magalu reinvented themselves, moving from a traditional world of a transformation where you're a physical retailer with omnichannel. They now see themselves as that digital platform with a physical presence. And Allstate, that had a connected car program running for many years, recognized that they should spin out Apigee so that it could execute autonomously from the parent. Simon will touch on those two types of innovations. So with Magalu, this is an example of a customer that has realized those market capitalization increases. If you look at their stock price over the last few years, this is a business really focused on that partner ecosystem. They used to sell tens of thousands of SKUs. They now sell 13 million products. They have 15,000 sellers on their platform, complex partners on board within only 2 weeks. Apigee helps you onboard those partners efficiently. And since the last 4 years, they've seen between 60 to 76% year-on-year growth in e-commerce. With Apigee, now that connected car program within Allstate had a vast volume of data, but they recognized that there were some industry challenges that they wanted to solve by unlocking this data and monetizing their data. So they wanted to better understand risk and more precisely price insurance. That means they need the best insights, which means they need the most data. So by not just using the data from the parent, but opening up their APIs to all sorts of participants, it means that they can hoover up much more data, thereby driving much more insights through their models, and thereby making a much more compelling service of which they monetize. They sit on over 85 years worth of claims frequency and severity data, 10 years of experience in capturing telematics data, these sensors in things like phones and cars, 35 billion miles of driving data built into these models. They partner with mapping companies and weather companies. Customers include financial services customers, transportation, ride-sharing companies, automakers, and government. So this is a great example of a virtuous cycle of data flowing in and out of the business. They've even signed up a competitor to their parent Allstate because they just need more data, which just makes them more valuable. Right, thank you. And now I'd like to hand over to Simon.
Thanks very much, Ollie. Very good to be here. So I'm going to talk about really what this picture shows here. And you recognize that symbol. How can we as incumbent businesses, release the inner digital Superman so we can create new growth and value. And we're sort of trapped within the body of Clark Kent at the moment in terms of the ways that we think and the ways that we act and our existing business model. And what I'm going to try and show you over the next 20 minutes is how we can apply platform thinking and platform strategy to create a significant commercial impact and create a new way to grow in the digital economy. A bit of background, Ollie's already introduced me. I won't go through this in detail. I've written a book on this topic. I work with the World Economic Forum on their Accelerating Digital Transformation program. And that is, again, about how to help leaders and regulators and government think differently about the types of business models that are going to be most appropriate in a digital world. And I work with execution partners like Rainmaking, a big corporate innovation company and venture building company, to help corporates move forward with these principles. And my experiences across many sectors and geographies, and I'll touch on examples from these during the talk. So the problem is summed up by these three statistics you can see here. And my contention is that digital transformation wasn't making a big impact before COVID. COVID increases the importance that we think differently about how we operate in a digital world. And you can see these three statistics here from surveys of C-level executives in about 18 months ago, that they were worried that their existing business models were becoming increasingly unviable as their sector digitizes, because that increases competition, opens up transparency about prices. And as they try and compete with or keep up with consumer demands and compete with other players, it increases costs. And in fact, 85% of digital investments deliver zero or negative economic value add. That's the profits after cost of capital. And as a result of this, even before COVID, executives were not particularly happy with the innovation efforts of their organization. And now we're under even more pressure. The imperative to really think differently and apply new business models is just even bigger. And if you are an investor, I'm sure all of you are, and you have your own private investments. Working big companies are also investors. Where do they place their bets? What type of business models would you invest in compared to others? And here's an example of the returns of businesses that operate a platform business model at the top there, compared to, I guess, more traditional tech companies in the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones. And if you're an incumbent organization from a traditional industry, you tend to be represented by the bottom figure there. So if you're thinking about where you're going to invest your money, either as private investors or as companies, maybe there are new types of business models that you should be investing in, which have more resilience and more potential to grow. And my contention is that those are platform business models, and every company needs to fully embrace them if they want to stay competitive in a digital economy. And then it begs the question, well, what do we mean by a platform business model? And this is a very simple description of it. It's similar to the one that Ollie showed, showing that platform businesses essentially act as intermediaries between people who've got solutions and people who want solutions. And if you're an incumbent corporation, you provide some of those solutions, but there are many other people who could be complementary to you to create solutions that serve your customers. And the aims of a platform business are to facilitate high-value transactions, not just sell your own products, and to create network effects that mean that your business is more valuable the more people who use it. That's why eBay and Uber and Airbnb are so powerful. They facilitate interactions, and the more people who use it, the more suppliers, the more consumers, the more valuable it becomes. And the key requirements are that you create an infrastructure, like Ollie said, enabled by APIs is really critical, that anybody can plug into your business. Now, how that translates if we go forward, oh yes, there's a slight technical problem. Let's see. I hope you can see a picture of a tweet by the CEO of Twitter. Let me see. Yes, hopefully you can see that. Ollie, can people see that? I hope so.
I'm probably not the best person to answer because I've been having problems as well. But yes, I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay, good. So the key essence of a platform business is summed up by this tweet from the CEO of Airbnb, who said here, you can see it, Marriott wants to add 30,000 rooms this year. We can do that in the next 2 weeks. And it sums up the essential power of a platform business model where you are leveraging the assets of other people. You don't have to build hotels to be able to provide a place for people to stay. And for an incumbent organization, there are many options to where you could play in a platform economy. You could create your own platform business. You could supply into platform businesses. You could use platforms to supply you with services, or you could create enabling capabilities that you make available into platforms to help them run better. And as Ollie said, 30% of global economic activity is going to be mediated by platforms in 5 years' time. That creates an enormous market for people who can create enabling solutions that make those platforms run better. And financial services is a golden example of this, to provide financial services to support platform businesses. So making this a bit more tangible, what I've identified is 6 main types of platform plays for corporate businesses and 4 types of executional approaches. This is really critical because it helps to translate what can feel like a very technical topic to senior commercial execs into something more tangible. And I'll just describe these quickly and show you some examples. So at the very, very end there, you could reinvent your company entirely and say, we're going to become a platform business like Amazon did and Apple did 20 years ago. Or you can start more simply on the bottom left here and say, well, we're trying to create digital solutions. We don't have enough capabilities and resources in-house to do that. How could we tap into the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of experts who are out there in the world, freelance experts, who we could use to help us create new digital solutions? And that would be a very legitimate way of augmenting your own capabilities with third parties. And there's some great example I'm going to show you in a minute of a company who's done that. You can create your own digital solutions, and those would be software-based products and services. And most unicorns start off doing that, and then they evolve into platform businesses over time. Why can't we as incumbent businesses create our own unicorn businesses? There's no reason. We have all the assets there. There are a few things missing, which I'll describe in a second. And of course, you can embed your products and services or your digital solutions into other people's platforms. You can create online marketplaces like we heard with Magalu in South America. You can also orchestrate completely new ecosystems that are emerging at the boundaries between sectors. As these boundaries are blurring, there are wonderful opportunities to create new ecosystems that you can orchestrate with a platform. And in terms of the way of executing, the problem that many traditional companies have is they think we need to build this internally. It's a big IT project. It's going to take 5 years. And that's the wrong approach entirely. Occasionally, you can do something like that where you have particular power to do so. But there are other approaches that are complementary to that, which need to be part of the armory, if you like. So collaborating with startups to help you speed up time to market is really a very powerful and legitimate way to act. You can buy in and acquire companies to help you speed up your activity. And one of the best approaches that I do a lot of work with today is creating your own external ventures outside of the core business, where you can see a market opportunity, a bit like Arity we heard from Ollie just now. But if we try and create that within the core business, we know it's going to get suffocated. So let's create a separate venture with separate metrics, new skills, hired new talent, to drive forward quickly and effectively to grab that market opportunity. And that's a particular a capability that is really important now as things are moving so fast. And here are a few examples of companies to bring to life some of those examples I gave you there. So I won't go through them all right now, but let's just pick on a few here. But General Electric, it decided when it was moving to be a digital company, digital industrial company, it said, well, we just don't have the skills in-house to create the products and solutions that our customers want. And they created a huge marketplace to tap into external talent outside the walls of their company so they could develop products and services for their customers. Very powerful, very practical platform strategy, which delivered about $7 billion of value to the organization over 7 years. I'm going to pick on a few examples of companies later on as I progress. I just want to pick on a few. Tinkoff Bank is one of my favorite examples at the moment from the financial services sector. And it has completely revolutionized digital banking. Started off being a traditional bank and has created a whole series of lifestyle ecosystems around it, and has some of the highest metrics for banks in the world today in terms of return on equity and so on and so forth. And in the world of embedding capabilities into platforms, PayPal is obviously a great example there. PayPal enables nearly every global platform, or many global platforms around the world. So let's look at some examples. And one of my favorites of a traditional company that has really embraced platform thinking is Ping An, which was and still is an insurance company in China. But these charts you see here represent how they shifted or reallocated capital to the new types of business models that I've just been talking about. In 2008, they were a simple insurance company operating with that type of business model. By 2018, they had reallocated capital, management attention, and skills to create a network of ecosystems outside of traditional financial services, in real estate, in buying and selling cars, in healthcare, remote healthcare. And those ecosystems, enabled by platforms, have helped it to grow way beyond their traditional competitors. And I anticipate they'll do more and more of that over time, and their business model portfolio will evolve even more to be even more powerful. And you can see here, this is their share price over time here. They're the blue. They're now worth more than Europe's biggest bank, HSBC. HSBC used to own a large stake in Ping An. It sold that stake after the last financial crisis. Ping An has overtaken them as much more valuable, and now has become the biggest independent shareholder in HSBC. And you can see HSBC's trajectory compared to theirs. And indeed, they've outperformed their local competitors. So it's not just, well, that's China. The application of the business model has helped them outcompete Europe's biggest bank and the local competitors as well. And the key thing that has driven it is leadership. The leader said, he looked at how Alibaba and others were operating, and he said, we want to emulate that. He said, we're no longer an insurance company. We are now going to be a tech company with financial services licenses. And they embrace platform thinking, and they've been incredibly successful. We'll come back and talk about them maybe later on today. So what does this mean for leaders and traditional companies? Well, I wrote a book on this called Fight Back. And it's as much about fighting back against old ways of thinking and acting as it is against fighting back against digital disruption. And there are 5 key steps to renew an incumbent business model, to make it fit for the future. And particularly in these times of crisis, the imperative to apply these principles is really strong. And the first thing is we need to reset the way our leaders think about growth and value. Most leaders of incumbent businesses have become successful operating a certain type of business model. And the digital business models that we've been talking about just now are often alien and different. We need to rethink about the ecosystems that are emerging and where we could play and our roles within that. And this comes back to the way of executing as well. We can't just try and execute everything from within the core business. We need to reallocate capital, as we heard from Ping An, in a different way, and put our money where our mouth is if we really want to be a digital player. And probably the most crucial thing, we cannot do disruptive innovation from within the core business. It rarely works. We need to create an ambidextrous, two-handed organization and provide the space for new digital businesses to take off, like we heard from Arati, from Ollie earlier on, where they can access the assets of the core business, but they have different leaders, different metrics, different space in which they can operate, often equity-based ventures. This is how Ping An did it. It created separate equity-based ventures which attracted A-grade entrepreneurs to drive them forward, but connected them back to the core business and allowed the core business to control them. They weren't third-party investments. And then finally, if we do this, we can, like Ping An has done, is widen our scope, be more involved in more parts of our customers' life, and deliver much more value to them. Now, I'm going to end with one tip and a couple of case studies, and then we'll open up for discussion. One of the most challenging things when you're trying to describe these types of new business models is making it tangible for the leaders of the business units in the core business. They have all the power. They run the business, they have the budgets, and they have all the assets that you would love to leverage. And one thing I find very effective is to sit down with the leaders of the existing business units and show how, by creating digital platform businesses, whether they're internal or they're separate ventures, we can increase the revenue, all the core metrics that are important to the core business, by a significant amount. And we can show how we can do that to defend their business, create new revenue, or other metrics that are important to them. And here's an example I worked on with an insurance company to show over 5 years how we could create a material difference to their business by applying the principles I've just described today. And I'll give you a couple of examples here, how it is possible for my belief, any business in any sector to create a significant new growth path if they can remove the blinkers and apply some of the principles and methods I talked about. And FL Smith is a very large mining company that wanted to ask itself, how do we create 20% net new growth over the next 5 years? And by applying the principles I talked about, envisaging new ecosystems and spotting opportunities to apply those different platform plays and the different ways of executing, they identified 3 billion of new growth opportunity over the next 5 years. Now, the other example I want to share with you is a small insurance company that said we need to be engaging with millennials. They don't buy insurance. They don't look to the future. We know that they will make up the majority of the insurance market in a few years' time. How do we engage with them? We don't have the skills to do that. And they created a separate joint venture with entrepreneurs with separate equity structure to tackle that market. And that's been incredibly successful, and they're on track for significant impact to their core business. And they've done it at record speed, something that would be impossible within the core business. And then finally, probably the best example of the ambidextrous organization being put in place, BP, knowing that fundamentally fossil fuels are under significant threat over the next, no one wants fossil fuels over the next 10, 20 years. They said, we cannot innovate, or we need to change the way we innovate. It's not making an impact. They created a separate unit called Launchpad, in which they said, we're going to create 5 unicorn businesses over the next 5 years. 5 unicorn businesses, but critically, those businesses need to add 5% to the EBITDA of our core business as well. So they created a future business metric, and they said to engage the leaders of the core business, we are going to add value to you over this period as well. This is not innovation theatre, something a long way away from the core. This is about changing the whole business so we can be fit for a different sort of future. They put their deputy CEO in charge, and it's one of the best examples I can see today of really applying the ambidextrous approach and being committed to it. So, thank you very much for your attention this morning, and looking forward to discussing this with you. it's all about how we can release the inner digital Superman from the wonderful assets and capabilities we have, which tend to be locked inside our Clark Kent, which exemplifies how most businesses, incumbent businesses, operate and think today. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and really fabulous insights shared there. So this is our opportunity now to take some questions from the audience. First of all, from Roland, there's a perspective, from your perspective of working amongst European corporates, do you think too many are waiting for or expecting the EU to assist either financially with innovation or controlling through regulation, as opposed to corporates actually being braver and starting out and perhaps leveraging a first mover advantage? I think, Simon, you'd be best to answer that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So obviously we don't want to wait for regulators to do anything, because that would be a recipe for disaster. However, we do need to help regulators create the right regulatory environments which are fair and reasonable. And we need to help government as well create the right industrial structures for particularly European economy to thrive. And the problem we have at the moment is that because traditional European corporates are not so sophisticated about the digital world as some of the big digital giants, their lobbying skills are less powerful. And so we need to upgrade our knowledge of how digital business models like the ones I mentioned operate, so that we as industrial European companies can lobby more effectively and help governments and regulators create more effective structures for innovation to happen. And it's quite interesting. One of in the financial sector, PSD2 has been a regulation to open up our data, customer data from banks, to allow people to innovate on top of it. And that's created a whole flurry of wonderful innovation in the fintech world. And we may well see that type of regulation applied to the big tech giants to force them to open up access to data. And that's coming through at the moment through data portability. So we need to we need to take the bull by the horns and innovate for ourselves. But I think we need a more sophisticated discussion with government and regulators as well.
Fantastic. And a great question here from Dorota, and apologies if I've not said that correctly. Do you always need to have a visionary leader at the top? Otherwise, how do you approach making a case for the investment into a transformation into a platform business where the ROI is difficult to estimate? And in some business cultures, financial numbers have to stack up front. Very interesting. And by the way, I was on a conversation with a cohort of banking leaders yesterday, and we were talking about DBS in Singapore, who launched 150 APIs as part of their go-to-market. And the position there is that they don't want to be front and center. They don't want to be owning all these channels. They want to be invisible. That's their strategy. And I can't imagine there was ever a proposed business case with hard numbers behind, something like that. But Simon, any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, you're quite right. The question is a very good one. So sometimes a business does have a visionary leader. Now, the danger sometimes is that leader can be too visionary. And if they don't pull along with them the shareholders and the rest of the organization, that can cause a lot of trouble. In the case of Ping An, the leader is a visionary, and he's the founder of the company. He's an entrepreneur. So for him, he's got that power, like Jeff Bezos, to make things happen. But most traditional industrial companies don't necessarily have that in place. And we tend to have what we might call caretaker managers, who are very successful operators of existing business models. And their job tends to be very focused on what the shareholders or the pension funds are acquiring from them. So we do need we need some parallel activity. We do need a new discussion with the shareholders to allow us to do new things. But probably first, we need to prove that new business models can deliver value. And that's why I was saying before, one of the good techniques is to work with the existing business leaders to show how the platform activity can deliver a meaningful impact. And that is, that's a difficult thing to do, but it can be done, and I think it's an important part of the process. Now, occasionally you might say, well, it's a no-brainer to do APIs, and I think that is correct because it can facilitate so many things, and it's not a huge cost. But to really get the organization to move forward, you need to have a sort of grown-up discussion showing practically how platform business models can affect the core metrics. And indeed, one of the best ways of doing that is to create external ventures where you can fast track something quickly into the market. And that demonstrates the art of the possible. We've now done it 3 times, like the example from the Danish insurer there. We've created this venture, and already it's worth a lot of money. It's delivering a lot of value. Wouldn't it be great if we could do 10 more of these? And that demonstrates the art of the possible, helps the leaders of the core business become more confident, and it's something they can show to the shareholders to illustrate what can be done.
Fantastic. So let's have a chat between ourselves, but I am keeping an eye on these questions as they flow through, and I'm going to lean on some of these because they're spot on. And I think that point about executive leadership, but also proving is like always hot topics. I mean, I think even pre-COVID, right? There's another question actually about quick wins from a platform strategy. I think you've kind of touched on that. How to demonstrate something relatively quickly within. And this individual's asking between 3 months is pretty tight. One of the things I've certainly learned is a lot of businesses are already trying to work efficiently or more efficiently with partners. So perhaps let's not focus on unknown innovation first. Let's perhaps think about who are the partners you're working with or work with imminently, and let's do this in new and interesting ways. And there, I think more immediate things can be shown at pace. I mean, Simon, any reflections on that comment?
Well, you can, but that's sort of incremental. I mean, it's necessary but insufficient. It's not going to move the needle. And you've seen. I just showed the share prices of the DAX. It's the same with the FTSE. All incumbent businesses are not doing well. The ones that are doing well are the ones that have invested in platform business models. And Apple and Amazon didn't start out with that. They added it to their business model 10 or 20 years ago. So, absolutely, you need to be more efficient. You need to improve the way you serve your existing companies and optimize your existing business model. Absolutely, that's critical. But if you don't do the other thing, the other part of the ambidextrous activity, you're just in a race, with your competitors, getting nowhere. I mean, so you do need to do both of these things. And rather than put virtually no investment on this side, or a tiny bit of, let's throw a bit of money to the innovation team, like BP has done, you need to say, right, we're going to put 500 million here to create 5 unicorns, while also driving value for the key metric, which is the EBITDA margin. And that is a very bold and the most appropriate approach, doing both activities and committing to both at the same time.
And with Launchpad, so significant ambition there, but are any of those ventures likely to erode any of the existing lines? Because I think one of the challenges I've often seen is that classic innovator's dilemma, where there's a new venture being proposed. There's certainly interest and excitement around it, but there's concern that ultimately it's going to disrupt a revenue line that actually might be quite profitable, even when they know that revenue line is potentially at risk, if not at risk.
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and particularly in the retail sector, when retailers think about creating online marketplaces, which is essentially allowing third parties, maybe competitors as well, to sell through you to your customers. And even Amazon had this debate internally: should we open up to third parties rather than buy in the inventory ourselves and sell it on? And they had the foresight to look ahead and said, well, what do our customers really want? Let's think about our customer, not about us. And our customers want choice and selection, and we can't. We don't have the money or the capability to provide everything for our customers ourselves. So by looking ahead, focusing on what customers needed, and understanding how the internet and digital technology could enable that, through APIs 20 years ago, as you said, they said, well, let's believe in this vision and make it happen. Now, in practice, how you execute that needs to be done very carefully, and the third-party partners or complementary service providers you choose to start with, you might choose those that are not directly competitive. And over time, as you're growing the knowledge and skills of how to curate a marketplace, then you might open up further. And that's what a lot of the second wave of traditional retailers have learned about how to do. So yes, there is a potential threat of cannibalization, but it can easily be managed if you think it through properly. And indeed, in the case of BP, none of those businesses are threatening the core business. In fact, as I said, they've been explicitly set up to drive 5% EBITDA improvement to the core business. So it's actually the opposite. They're designed specifically to deliver that value there, as well as separate value for themselves.
Great, thank you. You talked about the value that incumbents might be sitting on. And the danger, I guess, is that there can be an ego around the brand. And I just talked about that. Just mentioned that example of DBS, where they want to be invisible. I mean, that's quite an extraordinary statement for a bank to make, where often they want to be front and center. The brand is a compelling gravitational pull. Everybody wants to kind of own that relationship with a customer. What do you think are the assets for an incumbent, and what are the liabilities for an incumbent when thinking of a platform strategy?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So again, what you need to do is have a vision of the future. So if you don't have that, and you're always looking at the present or the past and trying to extrapolate from the past, then you tend to be trapped in the mindsets which are not going to be helpful. So as you say, banks often say, we want to own the customer relationship. We want, it's our ego. We want everybody to come through us for servicing. And that's pretty dangerous. If, as opposed to that, you look into the future, and for example, you see that in 5 or 10 years' time, platforms are going to be mediating 30% of all economic activity at $60 trillion. So rather than you trying to compete with people who are much better at managing customer relationships, like DBS has done, you say, why don't we enable it? Why don't we embed our capabilities into other people's businesses? And in fact, just this is one example, the market for what's called embedded finance. So that's financial services embedded at the point of purchase. If you want to go get an online MBA, you want to get a loan right there and then that can be given to you there and then without having to call up the bank and try and sort it out. Or you're seeing more of this in terms of you want to buy a product, but you want to pay for it in installments over 12 years, over a year. And this market of embedded finance, I did some analysis of this the other day. It is potentially more valuable than the whole of the global software market in 5 or 10 years' time, because everything there's an explosion of digital services, and we all need to pay for them or exchange value related to them. And so it's a clever move by DBS to say, actually, we can see this future, and we want to enable it being in the background rather than trying to compete with companies who are much better at controlling the customer interface. Now, that's one strategy. Ping An has taken a slightly different strategy, and both of these can be complementary. If I was talking to a bank, I'd say do both. Ping An said, we want to create deeper relationships with our customers, so let's create some platforms and ecosystems in areas of their lifestyle that we normally don't participate in terms of buying and selling cars. Let's create a marketplace for that, or a remote healthcare telemedicine platform, which has obviously taken off like crazy with COVID. And they created these separate ventures just for the opposite reason of DBS, so they could be at the center of those experiences, and those could act as a channel for their financial services. But interestingly, they created separate brands for those because they knew that those brands needed to be, people didn't affiliate Ping An with buying and selling cars and so on. So they created separate entities, separate brands. They control them. Some of those they've IPO'd, but they've created, as a result, this incredible network or ecosystem of platforms that are all connected by one single sign-on mechanism and an API structure behind it that allows them to intermesh across all of it. That's probably one of the best examples of tackling the question you just asked there.
Yeah, fabulous. And I often like that example also from Arity, where they are now signing up competitors to their parent because they realize they've recognized this for years, but more data means they can provide more insights. It means more value, which makes them just more compelling. This kind of gravitational pull, flywheel effect around data. And I guess we often talk about data being the new oil. It's a cliche, but it's that combination of data and models. So, i.e., the automatic insight being generated out of these vast amounts of data is going to be their defensive wall as they open up and merge into all these other different touch points and in industries. I think perhaps one more question for me, and then I'm keeping an eye on the audience questions. This is a challenging time for obviously many industries. We've just been actually working with a retailer that's seen 90% drop in their revenue, but they recognise the importance of that API strategy as a defensive and an offensive tactic. I often feel like there's this sweet spot for an incumbent has appetite. So there's if there's too much kind of competitive pressure, they can default to safety, and if there's not enough, this other end of the scale, they're kind of apathic. Now, because there's a situation now, I guess a lot of things are being shaken up. What do you think will be compelling messages that our audience could take away around this situational awareness that we currently have, this kind of landscape that we have where so many of industries have been disrupted? What do you think could be like the three things to call out that would be compelling messages going forwards?
Yeah, I think one of the most useful things to do at this time of crisis is to spend a little bit of time zooming out from all the pressures of the core business and looking to the future, because the crisis is just accelerating digitalization, as we know, and in certain sectors more than others. And if you've got one of my colleagues gave this great suggestion the other day. He said, "Why don't you just apply 0.1% of your employees to look at the future?" Now that can be like 40 people. Can you afford 40 people? Some of them could be on furlough, really doing nothing, to look into the future. Because if we don't do that, we're acting blind. It's like walking forward without knowing what the future is like. And we need to ask the difficult questions. How quickly is cash going to disappear? If you're in financial services or retail, that's a really critical question. If you're a retailer, if you don't have an online marketplace, which is a type of platform, how are you going to compete with others that have got that? I mean, if you did have it in the COVID crisis, you'd be doing really well, like those that do. So allocate, it's not much, but allocate some people to look into that future and translate it for the leaders of today so they can really understand it and internalize it. And everybody's got enough resources to do that. That would be the one most important thing to do. And understand the business models that are likely to be most effective in that world, which will be those that connect people together, platform-based business models, and then try and translate what that means to the core business and look at those different types of platform plays I described and the different ways of executing them and create a plan that can apply those to our business and finally make it tangible to the existing business owners. So if we do this, like BP has done, we expect, or we will plan for, this type of impact on the core business, as well as keeping us fit for the future in the, if you like, the invent the future part of the business.
Fabulous. And that resonated with some reading I was doing around the companies that struggled after the financial crisis and those that actually did reasonably well after the crisis. And it was interesting to reflect that those that did kind of broadside, horizontal cost cutting and didn't invest in these specific opportunities were like 3 times less successful than those that actually took an opportunity to cut costs in certain areas, but also think about the future and areas. Okay, so we're coming up towards the end, so let's move to just another slot for Q&A. Here's a question. I mean, it's a bit of a classic, and I think we've touched on some of this already, but I mean, how do you position a platform strategy in a traditional company? CEO and the board down are very conservative.
Well, you've got to spend time with them. It's like any type of education. Make it tangible to them and show how it can impact the figures or the numbers that interest them. So again, I go back to that chart with the insurance company saying, your current growth plans show this trajectory, or maybe, in this at the moment, it's a negative. And here, if you did these things here, we believe it can deliver this. And that's the type of interesting discussion you have. If you just do it on theory and ideas and concepts that they've never heard or they're not familiar with, then it tends to go in one ear and out the other. So we need to make it tangible for those types of people and put it in language that is motivating for them.
Thank you. Great. I'm just scanning the questions here. Yeah. Okay. I guess if I can be allowed to perhaps another one. What kind of platform types do you think are resonating with the C-suites that you're talking to right now? I mean, you talked about, let's say, markets and external, so marketplaces and like external ventures. What do you think are particularly compelling right now?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. It depends on the sector. So if you take retail, if you don't have a marketplace, an online marketplace, you're just not able to compete. When your customers want something and then they can't find it on your site, they default back to Amazon, of course. So if you're in retail, just being in the game means you need a marketplace. But that's just to be in the game. What I think is relevant for all sectors is to, often people think about platforms as being, let's create the Uber or Airbnb of our sector. That's really difficult, and most of those fail. The better starting point is when you say, let's create a digital solution that solves a really big problem for our customers. And if we design that right, it can be a point solution to start with, but like any software business, it can evolve into more of a platform, open platform over time. But that tends to be the way that the unicorn businesses started out. They solve a particular problem first, and then they expand. And I would recommend for most companies in most sectors is create a portfolio of those. That's what BP is doing at the moment. They're not trying to create the Uber of energy. Way too complicated. Some very practical digital solutions that are addressing a big problem in the market that can also drive value to the core business. And that would be my single biggest recommendation. If you remember the types of platforms I talked about, the bottom two are probably the best to start with. If you're in financial services, think about embedded finance. If you're in retail, you need a marketplace just to be in the game. But you need a combination of those things, and you need a separate organization in which to build them.
Thank you, Simon. And what I love about that is the message. McKinsey recently, in an article about digital transformation in the time of crisis, talked about the mandate to be bold. So I think that's a great place to end today's session. Thank you for everyone for the questions today. I hope you found that session both helpful, interesting, and useful. We would also love to hear your feedback on this event. So please do send your ideas and suggestions through the feedback link here. Do stay tuned. Our next online meetup will be in September. So please share your thoughts so we can make the next edition even better Thank you for your time and look forward to seeing you next time.